So my name is Sripriya Sudhakar. I head the regeneration team in Tower Hamlets, and I set up the team in 2019. So it's a very relatively new team, and we have a team of 11 officers. And what I also kind of want to share is that the way we see regeneration in the borough is about what the council does collectively, not just about what we as a team do. And it's really helpful having the opportunity here now to reflect on the report, because the conversation around recovery is very much high on our agenda as a council and also as a team. So very, very helpful to be here. So just touching base on the 5 key areas that Hannah touched on. I think we have a tendency to talk about things in an abstract. As professionals, we all do. We understand, we talk about housing, talk about public space. But for the individuals, be it residents, stakeholders of our local community, it means very different things. So it means a home that they live in. It's about a park that they go to, which may be impacted on how it's used or well kept. It's about the traditions, about what they do on a daily basis, what they do, how they, accommodate things in their family homes, or what is their everyday practice. We would reflect that as, broadly around culture. What we call as transport is about how they get to their school, to their jobs, and more importantly, what we call skills. It's about what gets them the bread on table. And the closer we can get to seeing the individual and how what we do as built environment professionals impact on that everyday life, the closer we get to also the conversation around recovery, which is why I think the last 3 cross-cutting themes is crucial. Decision-making, diversity, community engagement, it's what we collectively are responsible for, not just as a local planning authority. And those 3 aspects also acts as a channel through which conversations take place between the home and a place, and how we as local authority or professionals engage with the everyday life. And in a way, if you visualize it, it's almost like the base of the tree. And how you nurture it is going to help you to branch out. So I see the recommendations. I think I completely understand what Hannah mentioned about, if not anything, just look at those 3 recommendations items is crucial. So I just want to expand on that a little bit more and reflect from our perspective. So in terms of affordable housing, I think Hannah touched on the challenge of viability, and all of us here are very familiar with it, so it doesn't need more explanation. However, from a perspective of Tower Hamlets, we are very, very small in the London Borough, very, very high volume of housing targets. We also have a very high land values, which makes it completely unaffordable, not just to rent, but also to buy in all forms, whether it's the more private sector-led rental market. So there are obviously many efforts that we are undertaking in terms of council's own building program, community-led housing schemes, self-build programs, etc. But what I really want to focus this morning is more around the viability challenges. In the last decade, we have seen the viability conversation moving more and more to a challenging position, where we are often put in a place to choose between, do we want a policy compliant scheme, but you have to accept very high levels of density and heights, or would you have no development or go with very low levels of affordable housing? It's not a position we want to choose. It shouldn't be really about whether it's about good placemaking or do you want homes. We want both. And it's becoming more challenging over the last decade about how do you get to that place. In the past, for those of us who've been to universities here, there's always this classic diagram of you can accommodate density in many ways. And it's usually a 72 rooms per hectare density. What we are talking today is way, way more. And therefore, pushing the envelope cannot be the only answer going forward. And therefore, we need to think clearly about how do we make things viable, and how can partnerships such as the ones that Hannah shared, are there opportunities for us to learn from collectively? What is the role of central government in terms of its funding? It's going to become more challenging for some of the estate regeneration schemes because the funding regime is changing. From the GLA funded schemes, for example, in the past we've had the opportunity to fund both existing homes, replacement, and also the uplift. And that policy is now changing to only the uplift. So all across the sector, there's a real challenge and nervousness, but there's also a real need for more homes. So I'm not giving you here any solution, but really focusing that it cannot be just the building volume being pushed as the only way forward. And we shouldn't be in a position where we are choosing between good cities or just host of homes being delivered. And other bits around community-led housing, policies and practices, great idea. And it's also going to be requiring more resources and how we build all of that within our conversation. Second thing around public space, can't agree more about the child-friendly nature and why it's so important. Again, being a very dense borough, we have limited space and we have to put the spaces that we have to really good use. And we have a large percentage, sadly, of primary school age children who are obese. And we also know the value of independent mobility in children in later life. So for all of these reasons, child-friendly approach is the right way forward for our future citizens. And there are some exemplary examples done, including in Aberfeldy, Exmouth Estate, our Parks program. It's how it becomes a norm, not something that is like an exceptionally good scheme. How do we get to a place where we don't have to have case studies, but it becomes the way we do things? And what we are doing is also starting to kind of have that conversations internally where we also move away from this traditional way of community consultation and engagement as under the statutory engagement process and how we build young voices to it. And equally a question for those who have a ballot approach, because children don't have a say in it, but they are also people who are going to be living in those estates as the regeneration goes through. It's how we also bring those voices into the ballot process is something that I'm very keen to forward as well. I'm very excited to also share with you about some of the works we've been doing around the public realm and how we bring land that is not put to good use. So we are very fortunate to have a very good program of local infrastructure funding consultation, which we undertake every year. And we have a dedicated pot of funding that is attached to the nominations we receive from local community. We've received amazing options, interventions requests, including from growing spaces, putting green spaces to places which were derelict, and we are able to now develop a program for community growing and also deliver, projects where previously the land was completely underutilized. But these are big challenges also about land, because it's not the land that we may own, it may be in private land. So it's unlocking those challenges, but it's given us a really great opportunity to start from there. The other project I'm very happy to share is also about some of the thinking we've been doing over the last year around the space under the DLR. So for those of you who are familiar, from Tower Hill to Lewisham and also up to Stratford, we have this amazing network that runs under stills, over stills, and then underneath this we have a large volume of space. It could be just under 7 hectares of green space, but this is not how it's perceived. It's just kind of derelict or sometimes sterilized space. The challenge has been that it's under multiple ownerships. So unlike a network rail where it's all in one ownership where you can do something proactive, the challenge is this presence is that we have to work with all of these landowners to bring together something comprehensive. So we're trying a pilot later spring this year where we're working with the landowners to identify opportunities where we can have community-led uses trialed, and using this process also understanding and unlocking challenges from DLR and TfL. So what we don't want is just to be a one-off pilot, but we want something that can be sustained. So the outcome from this exercise would be, this is how you do any community-led events, and this is the process, so that it's easier for those who may want to. So we don't want to be the people doing and leading it. We want the community to be able to do it. So this will be in spring, so if I do get the dates in, I will circulate. I'm very happy to have you all join in. So a little bit about culture. I think Hannah again touched on many things that we could be doing. Culture is so subtle that you don't notice it, but you know you've lost it when it's no longer there. So it's very, very fragile and is sustained by many legs, and it's not just about one big organization or institution, but we've been very lucky to have institutions like the Whitechapel Gallery, but also very, very rich network of local groups and organizations. Over the last decade, like many councils, the culture broadly as a service has reduced in its resource and also in terms of its capacity to deliver. This has meant that those organizations which would have previously engaged with the council through one route often struggle to know who do they reach out to. And as our services have kind of shrunk, these organizations that have depended on number of funding pots have also struggled, particularly in the COVID situation. So there's a real question for us collectively about how is this funded? Because as there's more demands on the local authority services and cuts, this is one that could be easily taken away. We're very fortunate to have a culture team, and this may not be the condition for many other councils. And the question is Borough of Culture kind of programs the only way? Because it takes a lot of resource and energy to do the one-year program. Are there other ways to sustain this longer term by sharing that much more widely? So I have no answer to this, but these are some of the thoughts that comes in terms of how we support it. Transport. Again, we're very lucky because being an inner London borough, very, very well established network of public transport. We have 2 crossrail stations as well. What we have seen over the last 2 years is, in the past, we've had a complete reliance on transport connections dictating where you locate your offices, where you locate your homes. That's driven density on all the conversations around housing growth. With this shifting, if you can call post-COVID, with that shift, what we are seeing is more and more local conversations and local connections. And this has brought to the forefront some of the missing links in those networks, be it cycling networks, being footpaths, smaller links. There's a lot of missing bits there. And these are not things that can be fixed overnight. There are some things we can do, like more green spaces, better cycling provision, but there are structurally some links that are broken, which is something we've been prioritizing over the last 3 years, which is the bridges across the River Lee to the east of the borough, and some of the severances caused by highways, rail networks, and also canals, and how we overcome that while celebrating the opportunity that they provide us. So we've been working closely with London Borough of Newham, and we were successful in getting the Levelling Up Fund for one of the key bridges across the River Lee. And we've also been working very closely with TfL. For all of you, you know about TfL's current finances. So the partnership is the key to unlocking these opportunities. So we've also partnered with TfL to secure the Levelling Up Fund for Whitechapel. The works will be commencing later this year, which is essentially improvements to the existing roads, pavements, and public realm. So finally, on skills. So we have Canary Wharf and Aldgate as 2 strategic business locations. We also have the Lower Lee, which is emerging as a production corridor. We also have Brick Lane, and we also have the Creative Enterprise Zone. So we have range of opportunities, but when you read a newspaper, the first image you would have of Tower Hamlets is one of Canary Wharf towers looming over really, challenging estates. That is the first photograph you see of Tower Hamlets. To an extent, yes, it is true that a large percentage of people who work in these offices are not necessarily borough residents, but that is shifting. And we are also kind of very keen to kind of welcome open arms the new emerging sectors such as life sciences, artificial intelligence-based work emerging, and also the digital sector. And it is also, being a most deprived borough, the key pathway out of deprivation. And that would have to start very early on from schools, colleges, and also with employers. And our work and economic development team work very closely with our business partners to start to kind of shape that. What is that future that's coming forward, and where do we invest now? Whether it's about investing in our schools program or the skills and partnerships. So that's very much an exciting part of our journey now. And there's a lot of conversation and also thinking about how we use Section 106 mechanism more creatively, rather than the traditional, construction jobs that we would have secured previously. So just to wrap up, so we talked about those 4 key areas, but as I mentioned, the key is these 3 themes and how we collectively work together. And in the recommendation, under the decision making, for example, the first one is about long-term thinking. Well, we also have the challenge of managing that with cyclical changes, with political changes, management changes, resource changes, and how we manage that as a council. But equally, there may be specifically sector-based challenges that you all have. So what does long-term thinking mean for all of us, and how we manage that is going to be crucial. Equally, there's somewhere it talks about being prepared to start again. We're very used to it as a local authority because projects begin, they stop, and then we would have to, but that is not the trajectory in private sector, in development industry. The question again is, are we willing to start again in some of those projects? Because most of our project management techniques is a singular line that starts from A to B. And where are the opportunities for us to have the conversation to restart? And then again, diversity, community engagement, Hannah stressed on that, can't stress more. And coming back to the earlier point about, how do you nurture the base of the tree through those mechanisms is going to be key. And the base of the tree is not just the local authority, it's all of us. And the way forward, as I can see it, is moving away from what I need, by which I mean individually, all of us, to what is needed in a place, and taking one place at a time. And to get there, what does such a approach to what is needed requires us to understand, obviously, the data, but more importantly, our individual perspectives. How do I see the perspective from a housing association? How does a housing association see the perspective from a local authority, who have to deal with a whole range of statutory engagement? And how does a developer read a local authority's position? So it's that shifting in perspective will help us enable to think about a place and what is needed, from there to begin what I need here. So on that note, hopefully I'll end. Thank you.